See, so caring for others is the low entropy solution. So if you look at that and you can say, okay, we are in a virtual reality, and our mission here in this virtual reality is to become love. That's why we're here. We make choices, and by those choices, we evolve toward becoming love, or we de-evolve toward becoming fear. And that's the game we're in. That's the name of this game we're in, called Earth and life and so on. And the way you win is by leveling up to become love, to become more caring. All right. Now, if that is not just an opinion, that's a fact based on science. Science says all these things.
Tom Campbell, welcome on the podcast, brother. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
I'm excited about a lot of things in my life. What am I most excited about? Well, I guess would be that it's the potential that I have to change this reality, to make it more gentler, kinder, and productive. That's a possibility. I don't know that that will happen because the future's not a done deal. We change it by the choices that we make. But for the first time in the history of mankind, I think we now have the opportunity to make that change. And that's not all because of me, of course. That's because we have the right technologies, the right ideas, the right concepts. It's finally all come together so that it's possible for us to make that bigger leap. We've been growing and evolving and getting kinder and gentler and becoming love better over the last 3, 4, 500 years, but it's been slow. It's a very slow evolution of the quality of our consciousness. And I see that in the near future, I have the potential to help that cause actually speed up. And no, it's not just going to be me. It's going to be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people that have to do it. There's no button that I can push that'll make that happen. But I see the way to it, and I see how it can happen. And I'm going to try my best to make it happen. So that's what I'm most, I guess, excited about, and that's what I'm trying to design, my efforts around that principle.
Yeah. You said that for the next 2 to 3 decades, humanity will see this giant leap forward in the evolutionary game. And as you just mentioned, a lot of pieces are starting to fall in place. I'm really curious to know from your perspective, what exactly are the pieces that you've seen that is having this acceleration in this quality of consciousness, and why now specifically?
Okay. I did not say that this will happen in the next 2 or 3 decades. I say that it's possible. And the probability of it is not out of reach. It's not like it's 1 in a billion, Anything's possible, but I mean it's possible within our reach that we can actually do this. We have all the pieces. Now, what are those pieces? Well, one, we have to get an understanding of how the world works, the nature of reality, why we're here, what's the point of us. And once we understand that, we have to get that understanding into the mainstream. Now, that's been the hard part all along, is getting it in the mainstream. I mean, go back 2,500 years ago, and you find the Buddha saying that this physical reality is all maya, it's all an illusion. And you've had, 100 other philosophers and spiritual leaders come to the same conclusion. And they all will say more or less the same thing, that what's the point of it all? It's to become love, to care, compassion, caring about others. That's what they tell us is true. And that's because that's what is true. that's what you find if once you understand the nature of this reality. And I got that understanding by exploring the larger reality through what many people call out of body. And so my explorations were firsthand in that realm, and I did this for many, many years until eventually I thought I understood consciousness. And then I wrote the books, My Big Toe, and it's a trilogy. It's got 3 books. In any case, those books were to explain consciousness. And I knew that consciousness was fundamental. I knew that consciousness is where everything starts, and everything else derives from consciousness, including us, including matter. Well, that idea is the opposite of realism, which says whatever's here, what we see is all there is, and that's the end of it. Then there's idealism that says, well, what's important and what really is real here is the cause of what we see. And what we see is not the cause, but what we see is the effect of the cause. And that their cause is beyond our direct awareness, outside of this reality. Well, those two philosophies battled for thousands of years, but now science has given us the basic answer to that, and that is idealism is correct. Most physicists that are in particle and physics and quantum science will tell you that reality is information based. Science has gotten that far, but they don't know what to say after that. They don't know how to explain that. They don't know how to take that and make science out of it. They know that's what the experiments tell them, but they can't they don't know how to bring that together in some sort of a coherent, intelligent theory. All right, so reality is information. Now what? Now what do we do? How can I derive physics from that understanding? How do I get matter from consciousness? How does consciousness develop matter? And that's where they've been stuck now for a long, long time. The original arguments were back in Buddha's time, back in Plato's time. Plato's cave allegory was the same thing. That was an expression of the idealists, versus the realists. So anyhow, what happens now is that we do just about 50 years ago, we got the first glimmer of the answers to that, and that was virtual reality. That reality can be made up of information. That reality is indeed, as the physicists say, information. Now, we call such a reality that's built up of information a computed reality. We call it a simulation, and we call it a virtual reality. Those are all words that mean the same thing, that a reality can be made by controlling the information according to a rule set. Okay, you have a rule set. The rule set defines what happens in that reality. Well, it defines what happens in World of Warcraft. The rule set defines what happens in Sims. No Man's Sky, what happens there is defined by a rule set, not just anything. It's not a random place. So you have a rule set, and then you have players. And the players get a data stream. They interpret that data stream, and their interpretation of that data stream becomes their reality. Well, that's the way it is when you put on a headset with a VR in it. Your interpretation of the data you get turns into your reality. So those are the concepts that we've needed to actually get the fundamental picture, and we haven't had them. When the Buddha was around, he didn't have virtual reality or a computed reality as a concept. He didn't even have computers as a concept. So he just said it's not physical. It's an illusion. The physical is illusion. And you read various philosophers up through the time since Buddha, you'll realize that a whole lot of them came to that same conclusion. That what really matters, what's behind it all, is not matter. It's something else outside of matter. Okay, so this idea that reality is indeed information based, and that the what I call the larger consciousness system is the one doing that computation. It's the server of the virtual reality. Then we have to ask questions like, well, where did that larger conscious system come from, and why does it need to make a virtual reality, and why one like this? And there's lots of other questions that have to be answered. And I've answered all those questions. And if you want, good detailed answers, go to my website or go to my YouTube videos, and I'll have good, solid, logical, scientific, answers to all those kinds of questions. And on the side, I've answered all the paradoxes in physics, biology, psychology. They all have paradoxes in it, things that we know are true, but we don't know why they're true. We can look at the world, we can do experiments and say, this is true, but I don't understand it. Well, this viewpoint, you can understand it. You know where it comes from. The idealists, their big problem is, from a philosophy viewpoint, they cannot understand how matter comes from consciousness. How does consciousness produce matter? Well, there is only one way for that to happen, and it is true, it does, that consciousness generates a virtual reality. And that virtual reality has a rule set that we call matter. Just like in The Sims, that bartender can take that glass full of that mug full of beer, and he slides it down the countertop, and it slides, and if you don't grab it in time, it slides off the end and hits the floor, and goes bang, and the glass breaks and makes a big mess. But if you catch it in time, well, that's a virtual reality. Why doesn't the glass fall through the countertop? Why does it fall and break? Well, because it has rules, and it's made its rules to follow the same kind of rules that we have. Gravity, that's one of them. Force, that's one of them. Friction. So all of that is in that sliding mug of beer down the bar. So it's part of the rule set. So now I've explained, I haven't explained to you yet here, but I've explained where consciousness comes from as best I can. Well, actually, that consciousness exists is an assumption of mine, but it's not a very wild assumption, since we all think we're conscious. The consciousness exists is pretty well accepted, and that's really the only assumption I have, that consciousness exists. And then I take the smallest piece of consciousness that you can imagine, and then I let that evolve. And I let it evolve in the way that it has to evolve. It's not, and then consciousness could have evolved like this. I don't do that. What I do is, consciousness has to evolve like this. It has no other choices. So I follow the logic of consciousness to how it must evolve. And when I get to the end of all of that, I've got a large consciousness system, a larger conscious system. It's aware, and it is an information machine. It's an information system. And that's not all that hard to understand either. What are we conscious of? What is consciousness? It's about information we take in. Okay, for us, we humans here, the world is what our senses. We've got 5 senses. It's what we can see, what we can hear, what we can smell, taste, and touch. And what would your world be like if you didn't have 5 senses? If you had 0 senses, take away all those 5 senses. What would the world be like? You wouldn't see anything, hear anything, smell anything, taste anything, or touch. You wouldn't feel anything. What would it be? Well, it would be like Descartes, right? It's just I am aware that I am aware.
Mm.
You simply would be aware that you existed. somehow, somewhere, you could exist because you're thinking. He said something like, I think, therefore I am. That's what you get to when you take away all the senses. There's nothing more than that. So for you to find a bar with a mug of beer sliding down it means you need a rule set. You need something that gives you information. Information can't be random. Then just random things would happen. And that would not be a very nice place where everything was just random, was there, not there, and you were there and not there, and you couldn't make any sense out of that. There would be no point to it. So it has to be ordered. If it's ordered, that's rules. So there needs to be a rule set that defines how that virtual reality will work. And so we have this consciousness system. And one of the things the consciousness system had to do in order to continue to evolve, and maybe here I should make the point, and every information system must evolve by lowering its entropy. Entropy is a measure of disorder. So when everything's random, you have high entropy. When you have to make things non-random, you have to make things meaningful. You have to build something that is ordered. And then you can attribute meaning to that or value to it, or it could be a symbol for something. But first you have to order things before they can become a thing. The thing has to not just be a random thing. The thing, by definition, is not random. It is what it is. So in an information system, the information evolves by lowering its entropy. If all of its bits are random, then it doesn't have anything. It's got no information. If some of its bits are not random, if they're ordered, then it has information. So it needs to create information. And the more useful that information is, the more valuable it is, then the lower the entropy is. It's got more meaning, more significance. Information is about meaning and significance. Information is non-physical. And people will think, oh, wait, I got a book, and that's information. No, a book is not information. A book contains data. So the ink on the little squiggles of ink on the page of a book are code symbols. It's data. And we look at that data, we, a consciousness. A consciousness looks at that data and interprets it into information. Information only exists in a consciousness. It can't exist outside of consciousness. Information is non-physical. Right? If you just have a book sitting there, with no consciousness to read it and interpret it, what information is it? It's not an information at all. It's a pile of data. It serves no purpose. Maybe you could burn it and get warm. Maybe it serves that purpose. Or you could put it on top of a bunch of papers to keep them from blowing away. But that's not its purpose. The information is in a consciousness, interpreting the data to be something meaningful and significant. That's information. If all those little ink squiggles were random dots, then there'd be no information in it either. So the information isn't in the ink, it isn't in the paper, it's in the mind of a consciousness who makes something of it, sees the significance, the intention, the importance of the data. Okay, now data is something that we can move around. It's physical. Data is physical. The book is physical and it represents data. You can put data on a tape or on a thumb drive, and that's the data's there. But that doesn't make there's no understanding there. It takes consciousness to understand the data. Okay, so consciousness is not physical. Consciousness is not created by the brain. The brain's created by consciousness. And all of those scientists who are trying so hard to create consciousness from a brain, they call it the hard problem. And it is a hard problem because it doesn't work that way.
They got it the other way
You
around.
know, like flapping your arms and flying, that's a hard problem too, you know, because people just don't work that way. We can't flap our arms and fly. So it's a hard problem. And it just doesn't work that way. The body is created by consciousness. So you have this larger consciousness system, and it's an information system. It evolves by lowering entropy, creating more and better information. It started with just simple things. You know, it was just a simple binary. I can tell A from B, 1 from 0, this from that. And that's where consciousness started, but it evolved. So then it was a 1 and a 0 and another 1 and a 0, or maybe 3 ones and a 0. And then it realized that it could count. It could group all those 1s and 0s that it could create in its mind, if you like. It could create those into groups. And then it learned arithmetic. And then, of course, multiplication and division and calculus and everything else in the math world became very easy for it because it was just dealing in objects of which you could sort, you know, any which way. And actually, all that higher math always results, you know, always resolves down into addition. You know, computer science will tell you that a computer is just a big adding machine. Everything's reduced eventually to addition. You know, but it's a fast adding machine. You know, it can add, you know, billions of things together in you know, a millionth of a second. So it can add things very quickly. So it can break things down. And we put in high level language that tells it what we want it to do. You know, we want it to fit a particular curve, or we want it to do a differential equation. And it understands that because the higher level language eventually reduces down to machine language, which is 1s and 0s. And it doesn't say, hey, computer, you know, resolve this differential equation. It tells the computer all the steps it has to do, and it boils down basically to addition. And subtraction is just addition in the negative numbers. You know, it boils down to just simple numbers and what you can do with numbers and how groups of numbers can interact with each other. So the machine is pretty savvy with its mathematics pretty quickly on, but it plateaus because making patterns and doing math and making sequences because it's created regular time. It just takes a 1 0 and lets those 1 0 1 0 1 0, you know, into frequency. It becomes a metronome, which becomes time, regular time. Before there was just unregular time, kind of primordial time. But once you have regular time, now you can have sequences that have meaning and sequences of patterns. So you see it gets complex.
Yeah.
But it's only what a single monolithic mind can make up. It's stuck there. And it realizes that if it wants to progress more, the best way to do that is to divide some of itself to smaller units with free will, because it has free will. It gives them free will, and now you have several things with free will, and eventually their experience base diverges because they're all different.
And they're interacting with each other now.
And they're interacting with each other with free will. So that, you know, that creates more possibilities. And then it does 100,000 of these smaller things. You see, it creates in a computer science vernacular, we'd say it's making virtual machines. You know, a virtual machine is an emulated computer inside a bigger computer. So we do that all the time. We can take a big mainframe and make it work as if it were 10,000 smaller computers, because there's 10,000 employees that are all working on that big mainframe at the same time. So it basically looks like it's, you know, all these smaller computers all going on doing their own work. And it does that by making emulations of computers. So we know how to do that, and the larger system knows how to do that. So it takes a piece of itself that makes another thing like itself. but smaller. Doesn't have the overhead. The larger conscious system remains the operating system, say. So now you have all these pieces of consciousness, and that's what I am and you are, and all the listeners out there. They're all what I call an individuated unit of consciousness. We're just a piece of this larger consciousness system. So you've heard that old saying that we're all one. It's true. We are all one. We're all just a piece of this larger consciousness system. And the system then started to evolve more quickly again because it had all these things with free will interacting with it. And here's a little interesting story that goes with this that I hardly ever do tell because it's off the path a little bit. And in the beginning, the larger consciousness system decided it would tell all those individual units of consciousness what to do and how to do it. Okay, guys, we're going to learn how to be nice to each other. Line up, and here's what we're going to do. And of course, the little pieces of consciousness said, "No way, this kind of simple, and go away. I'm going fishing. I'm doing something else. I don't want to line up with your things." So the larger conscious system got a little forceful, and I'm going to make you do this. Well, you can't make us do this. We have free will. And that's why we have an Old Testament and a New Testament. In the Old Testament, at least this is in Christianity, and we have the same thing elsewhere. If we look at indigenous tribes with, thousands of years of history, in the beginning, we had angry, jealous gods. We had gods that needed to be worshipped. We had gods that you had to make sacrifices to. We had gods that were nasty if you didn't do what they said.
Reward and punishment.
Yeah, and there was punishment to be had, you see. And then later, we have the New Testament, and it's all about love. Whoa, what a change from this angry, jealous God to this God that's all about love. God is love. So we had this really big change, and that mirrors the change in consciousness because we were the instrument by which the larger consciousness system grew up and learned how to become love. Now, I'll tell you that the idea that information systems have to evolve, if they're conscious information systems like the larger conscious system was, well, how do you think they get lower entropy? Making more structure, right? Things that are meaningful. What's the most meaningful thing that they can make? The most meaningful thing that now a social system can make. We have a social system. We have the larger conscious system and all the smaller pieces. And they're all on equal footing. They all have free will. So the lower that system entropy, you do it by cooperation, by caring, by helping each other. And that's what the system learned. It could shake its fist and threaten, and nobody did anything. They just did what they wanted to do. That wasn't helpful. But if you could teach and help people learn and understand, they go, "Oh, I see what the point is and it'd be better if we all worked together. We could get more done. We could accomplish more. We'd have more ideas, more concepts. We'd understand better if we all worked together." So that I can derive this logically, but just to make things quicker, what I derive logically is that love is the final result of low entropy consciousness. Consciousness evolves toward becoming love. That's the endpoint. That's the goal. And it does that by lowering its entropy. So consciousness lowers its entropy by becoming love. So now that's the purpose of the system. But the system itself had to learn that. It just didn't come with the innate knowledge of love is the answer. It had to learn that. And it learned that at first by becoming a bully. And when it was a bully, it realized that didn't work. It just created more chaos, higher entropy. And the harder it tried to force things to be low entropy, the higher entropy they got.
Yeah.
That just doesn't work. And it's conscious, it's aware, it's a smart system. It realized, eventually that that's not it. The way you help people learn and grow and do more and to be cooperative by caring. Love is the answer. So the system does love all of its little pieces. That's true. And we are cast off or created in the image of the creator. That's true. We're pieces of consciousness. It's a piece of consciousness. We're a smaller piece of consciousness, but we are of the same sort. We can actually do most of the things in our own small way that consciousness can do. So the larger consciousness can do. So that's just a little bit of the background that gets you kind of where we're going with this, that now we live in a virtual reality because first virtual reality was just communication protocols. You had all these IUOCs, but there was no language. So it had to create a virtual reality. A virtual reality means there are rules, that everyone in this virtual reality abides by these rules. So the first virtual reality was communication protocols, vocabulary, words, and here's what the words mean. So that was created. And that's what we had then, was like a big chat room.
Why do you think communication was the first step for these IOUCs, individual units of consciousness, to be able to start forming around in this virtual reality? Why was the communication the first?
Because everyone else is, if you can't speak to each other, you can't communicate, then you're just, everyone is an isolated, everyone is a single individual in their own island. They may, they may not even be aware of each other. They're only aware of each other. They don't necessarily have eyes, or hands or noses or things. They're not little human beings. They're just little pieces of consciousness. And if you don't make communications between them, then they're just lost in a void. Everyone is in its own space, in its own well. So communication is the key idea, so that they can interact with each other. That's what the free will gives them, this unique way of interacting in the ways that they find profitable. But they have to find it profitable for them before they'll interact that way. So you have to make it profitable to them. Bullying makes it unprofitable for them. They don't like that. So, I am leading up to, I'm still answering your first question. So this is all going somewhere.
We're all going. We're going to end up somewhere.
Yeah. So, anyhow, so that's kind of how it is. And it started out with a big chat room. And in this big chat room, well, now they could talk to each other, but that's about it. They could open up portals to connect to this entity or that, or shut them all down, or connect to everybody. They had their opportunity to connect to who and when they wanted to, and they traded their ideas and information. But that wasn't much. They weren't lowering their entropy very much. It was all intellectual. It was all just communicating things, and it wasn't going very far, very fast. So the system realized that they needed another virtual reality with rules that created meaningful situations, situations with consequences, situations with strategy, situations with things you had to think about, ways you had to be. And it did that. It created a virtual reality, because that was going to be the engine for more growth, more evolution. Because now just hanging around in a virtual reality wasn't the final answer. They had to have some better reality. So the system got some initial conditions and some rules. Push the run button and let the rules modify themselves according to the initial conditions. And it just let that run. So now it's going to create a reality out of rules and initial conditions. Now we know that. We call it the Big Bang. We say if you take a ball of plasma and it's very, very tight, very small, very high pressure, very high temperature, and you let it evolve, let it change according to the rules, then it becomes our universe, our physical universe. Okay? You get that hot plasma, it blows in all directions because it's hot and high pressure, then it cools, As it cools, you get suns, you get planets, you get all of it. So we understand that. Those are the initial conditions. And, like gravity is one of the initial conditions. So in any case, the system did that. It made the initial conditions, and it made the rules and said, all right, let it run. Well, it ran, and, probably a second or two, it blew up. It didn't work right. So it says, well, we need to change the rules a little bit. That wasn't too good. I didn't have enough gravity, and everything just went off into little pieces and never came back, and nothing good happened. So it turns up gravity a little, turns down something else. There's a set of about 5 of these cosmic constants that exist, and it's called the anthropic principle, that all 5 of these are so significant for the working of the universe that if any one of them changed, even in the 10th decimal place, the whole universe would collapse. It wouldn't be stable. But you need these 5 things all tuned just perfectly to each other. Well, how did that happen? Well, that's a big paradox. We don't know. We know there's 5 constants. We know they're all tuned to 10 decimal places to each other. And if any one of them changed, even in the 10th decimal place, the place would start to fall apart.
It's so
But
perfect.
we have no idea how that happens. Well, how did that happen? Okay, the system said, big digital bang, take 2. It changes the rule set, the initial conditions a little, punches a run button, that's take 2. Oh, take 3, take 4. Eventually, it ends up with these things all tuned to each other just so well that the universe is stable enough to evolve something like us, which was its intent. Some evolved thing that would have interactions that could be played by consciousness and have meaningful interactions, interactions with consequences. Now, what you said and did, what you thought would matter. It wasn't just, oh, I can say anything I want to so-and-so who just opened up that portal, and it won't matter. Well, now it does matter, because suddenly, when you log on to these humans running around on Earth, well, your decision is life and death. You need to find shelter. You need to find food. You've got a family and children, and you're all starving to death. And, oh, those people over there have some food. Could we go over and ask them, please, pretty please, would you give us some? Or do we just run over there and smack them because we've got more people than they do and take it away from them? Well, those were the kind of choices we had. And we had not learned. We had a lot of potential to evolve toward love, but we hadn't actualized any of that potential yet. It was just potential. We haven't done great things. We didn't do bad things. We just had potential that was unactualized. Now we got to actualize that potential, and we did most of it badly. We decided it'd be better to just smack those people and take their stuff, not cooperate with them and share or try to get more stuff together, more better. More of us we could protect each other, and we could maybe gather more things that we could share, but we didn't do that. That wasn't our first thought. Our first thought was, I want that. And then there was war. You tried to take it.
Because when we're in survival, we're in the energy of fear, which is the opposite of what you said is the motivator of the large consciousness, which is love.
Yeah. Right. So fear is the opposite of love. So we had a lot of fear, but then, the system realized, well, he put them in a pretty hard place to learn, but still, they had to learn. They had to take their choices, and from that, they had to grow and evolve themselves. And we've been doing that ever since. I've been told that human beings, as human beings, Homo sapien and Neanderthal and about 5 or 6 others that fit the human being, Homo sapien was just one of those. We've only been around doing our thing on this planet for about 200,000 years. Not been that long. And in that 200,000 years, we have evolved, but very slowly. We evolved to the way we order ourselves in groups. When we have a lot of us together, we manage by warlord mentality. somebody becomes in charge and they make all the rules for how we're going to live and who's important and who's not. And if you don't obey the rules, then, violence is done to you. You get eliminated. So that warlord mentality is what we got in the very beginning, but we've grown out of it to a large extent. We have social systems now where they're not like that primarily. Oh, we still have enough of it around, but we're better. We have better ways than just having a warlord tell us what to do. We still have dictatorships, but they don't rule most of us, or all of us anyway. So we are evolving. And if we look at ourselves now, we'll see we have a society that is much gentler and kinder than society was 500 years ago. 500 years ago, life was really cheap. Life was really cheap, and those in power could dispose of those without power very easily, with no repercussions. And that's only 500 years ago. So we're coming along, but the good thing about evolution is it isn't just linear. It's like this. It grows. I get my hand where you can see it. There it is. It grows very, very slowly, but then it grows fast.
Exponential.
It accelerates. And where we are now is just in that cusp of where it goes from I can't get my finger in the picture. Where it goes come on, camera, where are you? There, where it just goes slowly like that and doesn't seem to rise much. Then it goes up. Well, we're right there in that cusp where it starts to get faster.
We're at a tipping point.
So we're accelerating, because the more you know, the easier it is to know more. That's what in school, it's really, really hard learning numbers and alphabets and things. But once you know that, wow, there's so much more you can know. And then once you know all those other things, now you know math, and there's so much more you can know. And now you know history and all the reasons why people did what they did and what the situations were. Well, now you can know so much more. The more you know, the easier it is to learn more. And the more you learn, also, the more ignorant you realize you are. You realize the more there is to learn. So the more you learn, the more you realize there's a lot more to learn. And that's also true, which gives you the incentive to learn more. So in any case, it is accelerating, and we are on that part of the curve where it's been moving. The last 500 years, we've done more evolving toward becoming love than we had done in the 20,000 years before that, or the 50,000 years, maybe, or even 100,000 years before that. We didn't grow much, but the ideas were there, and they percolated a little bit, and then they got wiped out by a larger force that wasn't so evolved, and they'd percolate again, and so on. Well, now we've got some stable societies that aren't just about manipulating the people and taking advantage of people. And some of us are, and most societies are a combination of those two. We have abuses, yet we have protections. So it's we're growing, we're evolving, and that's a good thing. So that that little paradox of how did those constants come to be? Well, you see, there's an explanation. The only explanation. They evolved to become what they were, to those 10 decimal places, because that's what produced a stable virtual reality, what we call the physical universe. That was a stable universe. Now, in this stable universe, we also create virtual realities. So let's do an example. If you're in a virtual reality, let's say you're a barbarian in World of Warcraft. I only use that example because I don't have time for games. I work all the time, and my children played them. So my children are now in their late 30s. So you can see my understanding of video games goes back a ways, but you'll know what I mean when I say World of Warcraft. It isn't that old,
No.
And if you're a character there, where is the server? If you're the elf, if you're the barbarian, where will you find the server? You won't find the server, because the server is non-physical to you. It's outside of your reality. Is that virtual reality that's World of Warcraft? That's your reality. That's the physical reality. And the computer that's computing it and the player that's making all of your choices lives outside in some other reality that is non-physical to you. Now here we are in the same boat. This is a virtual reality. Where is the computer that's serving it?
It's
It's
outside.
outside of this virtual reality. It's in consciousness. And where's the player? The player that's is one of those individuated unit of consciousness who's logged on to play this human. And that player is in the same reality as the computer because the player and the computer have to talk to each other. They're passing data back and forth. The player says, well, here's what I just did. And the computer says, well, this is the difference it makes. And here's what happened next. So there's all this communication going on between the player and the computer. So they have to be in the same reality. Well, one is a conscious player, a piece of the larger consciousness system. The other is a piece of the larger consciousness system that's put itself together like a computer. It's stuck together, the logic and the thing. It can do all that. It's an information system. So it produces a computer. In my book, I call that the big computer. But it's just a piece of the larger consciousness system. It computes this virtual reality. See? And now here we are, humans in this virtual reality, and we realize that consciousness is not physical, neither is information physical. That this is an information system and that the source is consciousness. And the player, us, is a piece of that consciousness trying to evolve its quality by making good choices with its character. Its
The avatar.
character, the avatar, its character, the avatar doesn't really have a brain or anything. It's just like the barbarian or the Sims character. It's just data. And the computer sends a data stream to the player, just like the computer sends a million dots of light to your monitor, and you look at those million dots of light, and you see those million dots, and you says, "Oh, there's my elf, there's my Sims character," and they're walking around. Oh, I want them to go to the refrigerator and get a beer, so you have them go over to the refrigerator, and they get a beer and sit down and talk to this pretty girl. So you do that, and that's your choices for that character. So the character only does what you tell it to do. If you tell your Sims character and don't tell it to do anything, or you tell your warrior in World of Warcraft not to do anything, well, it just sits there. It doesn't act, doesn't function. It just is there. Well, that's how our avatars are. Our avatars are doing what we pieces of consciousness tell it to do. So you are not your avatar. You're not your body. You're not Emilio Ortiz. You are a piece of consciousness. You are consciousness playing Emilio. You see? So you're the consciousness. That brain in that avatar actually doesn't have a brain unless you split his head open, and then the system has to draw a brain in there. But otherwise, none of the organs or none of the rest of that is ever rendered.
Yeah.
You see? And it's not rendered because that's foolish to render things that the player can't see.
Just to
There's
give
no
an
point in that.
example on that, like let's say right now I'm not observing my room, for example. So the
Right.
virtual reality system wouldn't have to compute what the room actually looks like until I walk in, I'm there and I see my bed and I see everything. So can you explain
Right.
a little bit further into that topic of the rendering and the observer
It's
effect?
simple.
Yeah.
It works just like No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky was the first large production of the same kind of way that the larger conscious system works. And everything is rendered on the fly. So your bedroom is not rendered to you until you walk in and open the door. Then it's rendered according to the rule set.
So it's in wave
Now,
function. It's non-physical at that point before I
yeah,
see it.
but I wouldn't call it a wave function. It turns out that's a fiction. There is no wave function. Okay? So things are rendered to you just by what you're seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, your five senses. It renders that. Now, if there is somebody else in your room waiting for you to get done with this, then it has to render that to them. Now, the room you're sitting in right now, I see that there's books behind you, on a shelf, but that's not in your data stream. It's in my data stream because there are books there. You see, now here's how things come into the reality. Let's look at something that's different. Let's say there's a better telescope, a new super duper telescope, and it'll look further into the universe than anybody's ever seen before. So the scientists, they get that new telescope and they turn it on. Now, what are they going to see? Most people would say, well, they're going to see whatever's there, because they believe that this universe is physical and everything is out there. Well, it doesn't work that way.
They see what they want to see.
Now, here's what they're going to see. There are a certain number of possibilities of what could be there. And those possibilities are constrained by what we already have seen. So we're not going to see a string of dancing, elephants or something. That's not what's in outer space. We're going to see gas clouds and suns, and that's what's in outer space. We're going to see outer space stuff because we've already seen enough of it to know kind of what outer space is like. All right. So now, out of those, let's say there's 10,000 things that could be there where this telescope is pointed. 10,000 different kinds of things that they're likely to see. And actually, there's probably a million. Space is very complex. There's a million different things they could see. A random draw is taken from the probability distribution of those million things. So all of those million things don't have the same probability of being seen. Same probability of being seen. I get excited. I talk too fast sometimes, and all my words
same thing happens to me.
But anyway, so you have a million things, but they all have different probabilities of being seen. Some are real common. You see those almost everywhere. And some are real rare. So it takes a random draw from a probability distribution. And when you take a random draw from a probability distribution of those possibilities, then the things that are more likely to be seen are the things that you have a higher probability of drawing them out. I can explain that later if you want to know. But it's not just taking a random draw from all the possible things. It's taking a random draw from the probability of each of the possible things. Okay, and when that draws that thing of what they see, that's it. That's what they see. Okay,
because it's still an illusion as well.
Yeah, there's nothing out there, but that's what they see. That's what they're going to get. And now they get that. They have a photograph, and they publish it and everything. And anybody who looks there will see that, because once it comes into the reality, it stays in the reality.
That's a concept I hadn't heard before from you.
Yeah, once it comes into the reality, it stays there.
It stays there
so anybody
permanently.
Else looked in that spot. Yeah. So anybody else that looks in that spot will see that same thing. Otherwise, the reality would be very squirrely. Somebody else looked in that same spot a year later and they see something different. On the other hand, let's say, unfortunately, a meteor falls out of the sky and lands right on top of this telescope and all the people who just saw that. Okay? Now they're all dead. The information's gone. Okay, they didn't get it sent out to the world yet, and now everybody who saw it is dead. All right? So now they say, well, we'll build another telescope. So they rebuild that same telescope and they try it again. This time, they'll get a random draw from all those possibilities, and it's very unlikely it'll turn out to be the same because it's a random draw from all the possibilities of the things that it's the random draw from the probabilities of all the possibilities. So they'll get something different. That's okay. There's no conflict here because the information that was once here got erased. It got erased when the meteorite fell on it and wiped it all out. Now they'll get something different, but now that stays here. So you see, things can disappear here if they get erased.
One question there, because when, if I had seen it, let's say I saw a new planet, for example, and I hadn't told anyone about it, if a meteor falls on top of me, I'm dead. Would that memory or that information get sent to the individuated unit of consciousness going up to the larger consciousness system, and will it get stored there if I pass away in the avatar body?
Yeah, everything you see and hear and smell and touch and whatever becomes part of the database.
It's like the
Yes.
Akashic
Okay.
records in the mystical
Yes.
sense.
Yeah. And I can tell you why that happened. Because of what I just said, the way new things happen, and it doesn't have to be a telescope and looking at something further. If you dig a hole in your backyard and you take a shovel and the shovel goes down and brings up a bunch of dirt, well, nobody knows what's under that dirt. Could be a dinosaur bone, could be a rock, a root, could be nothing but dirt. But there's possibilities. There's more than one possibility. So all the possibilities have probabilities. So a random draw is taken and you get one of those possibilities comes out. Now it's likely to be the things that are most probable, but it's a random draw. It could be something that's only 1 in 100,000 or 1 in 1 million. It could randomly draw that. Not as likely, but it could. So every shovel you take out, now a random draw is drawn, and that's what you're going to see there. Why is that? Because what's under the ground is not being rendered. So the system has to render something new. How does it know what to render? That's how it knows what to render. It takes a random draw from a probability distribution of the possibilities. That's what's there. Now, if it wants to know what's next to that, the fact that that's there says already gives them some information for what's in that vicinity. So it may change the possibilities around a little bit, and now they might be slightly different. But, you dig that, and you might get the edge of a bone, or you might get a gold doubloon if you live down around the Gulf Coast. You may get any kind of thing. You may get bird bones or nothing but dirt. It just depends on where you are, where this, what geography has been, what has happened there, what's the history of that place, and maybe your grandpa owned that property and that's where he stored all his money, and you'll find a box of gold down there. You don't know till you look. But all of that is probable, and part of it, if it's in the database already, because yes, your grandpa did own that, and yes, he did bury gold there in that particular place. Okay, then that's part of the record. And that you'll find that now becomes a probability of 1 because you're digging in a place where the record says it is. But let's say it's not in the database anymore because it wasn't your grandfather, it was your great, 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 grandfather, and nobody has ever searched for that information since. It's, that was 1,000 years ago, and 2,000 or 5,000 years ago, and the records have thrown that away because nobody's ever asked that question, and data that's not used eventually gets dropped, perishes. That's just good sense for cleaning up the database. You don't want to keep a lot of stuff that nobody's using. But if there's potential to use it, it does try to keep it. But not everything, not every detail is there. Now, what is there is a statistical idea of what it was like. So if you want to go back to cave people, you want to go back, you know, 1 million years ago, or 200,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago, and you want to see what people were like. Well, you're not going to say, I wonder what my great, 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 and however long greats you need to have. I want to see my ancestor, what he had for lunch, on what would have been Thursday, noontime, by 10,000 BC, or however you wanted to put it. You could specify some time. Well, it's not going to have what your ancestor ate for lunch that day. That's information that has not been used. It's not useful in general, but it will have what people of that time ate for lunch. So you'll get a picture of your grandpa and you'll get a picture of them eating some kind of slop, looks like oatmeal, looks, porridge, or, some kind of stuff. And it will be accurate in the utensils he used, kind of the way the bowl was made. All those things will be accurate, but none of them are really exactly what your grandpa ate then. because that's really not in the records anymore. But generally, what was done then is still kept, just as a matter of history, that it's there. So that's how that's why we have the Akashic records. In order for the system to run this virtual reality, it has to know what the probabilities are and what the possibilities are. It has to know all of that. So it has to create a database. And it does that from the 0 time to positive time further out. It says, okay, we're right here at this moment now. What's likely to happen next? Next delta t, and the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. So it can work its way out with looking for what's likely, what the probabilities are that these things would happen. And I call that the probable future. And it needs that because as we get to that point, somebody's going to do something, and it's going to want to know, well, what are all the probabilities of that happening? And I need to take a draw from that probability distribution. What are all the possibilities, and what are the probabilities? So it gathers all that data up. So when things happen, it won't have to start from scratch to try to figure out what the possibilities are and what the probability of those possibilities are. It'll have a pretty well filled out database already. So it has this future probable database, things that are likely to happen. But then as time goes by, the future becomes the past, right? It's 100 years from now, but in 1,000 years, that 100 years from now is 100, is 900 years in the past. So that becomes the past. Well, over many, many millennia, we have this database that runs as far as it can in the future before it gets silly, because the further out you go, the rattier the information is, and all the way as far as we can, as far as our archaeology can see, it goes back even further. So we have this great database that was created by the larger conscious system so that it could run the virtual reality more effectively. Also, the system has about a billion, which is a lot. That's like 10 to the plus 18. It has a billion cycles that it processes between our delta T cycles. So it can do a lot of processing between our cycles, but it still needs to prepare for things with, to the extent that it can. So that's why there is such a thing as the Akashic records. It's what the system needs in order to render this virtual reality efficiently. So that data is all out there, and that data is queried by your intent. Now, that's an easy thing to say, but a lot of people don't find it that easy to do. And that's because to query something with your intent, you need to have some discipline in your consciousness, some discipline in your mind. You have to have focus. You have to develop some things first before that really works consistently and accurately. But it can work consistently and accurately. You just have to develop that possibility. So that's where Akashic records come from. It's a necessary part for the system to do the virtual reality.
Yeah. I had a question regarding that in terms of the example you gave about digging up the hole. And essentially, if we hadn't dug up the hole before, the system has to render what the random possibilities or probabilities are. Would the quality of our consciousness determine what we can see, in terms of the randomness of the probabilities?
Yes, indeed. You've gotten into another important part of the overall process. So this reality I'm talking about is the schoolhouse for consciousness, for individuated units of consciousness to grow up, to lower their entropy and become love. The schoolhouse. Now, a schoolhouse will be a better schoolhouse if it has some feedback. So in the schools that we attend, the feedback comes in the way of tests. they give you tests, and you kind of determine how well you know the information by how well you do on the test. So that's the feedback you get. The way our system works, the way our consciousness schoolhouse works, is that we can modify those probability distributions with our intent. So there's a whole array of probability distributions out there. Let's say, I want the sun to shine tomorrow because I want to have a picnic. So I have an intention for sunshine tomorrow. Well, I can move that probability that the sun's going to shine a little bit. And the reason I can move it is there's a lot of uncertainty in weather. Weather can change quite a bit. If there was no uncertainty in weather, if the weather people could compute the correct weather all the time, they always told you exactly, it's going to rain at exactly, 6:27 and 16 seconds, at this place. And there it was. They always had it right on. Then there wouldn't be much room for me to maneuver in there. But if the weather is such that, it could rain or it could not rain, well, now I can modify those probabilities pretty successfully. But there's some farmer who really wants it to rain because it hasn't rained much recently, and they're not having a picnic. They want it to rain, so they have an intent for it to rain. Well, his intent's pulling it one way and my intent's pulling it another. It depends on all the intents they have from all the people concerned about a particular thing, and that probability will shift. So let's say you have a lump on your neck, and that lump bothers you because it's right here at these glands, and you're thinking, oh, that could be a cancerous lump on that neck. Okay. Well, now there's lots of uncertainty there. You don't know what it is. Nobody's looked at it. Nobody's done a biopsy. Could be just a fat lump, or it could be, cancer, or it could be 100 other things going on there that makes that lump. Could just be a swollen gland here someplace, and it'll maybe just go away again. So now you can start using your mind to change that possibility of what it's going to be. And you do that for a week or two before you go into the doc and say, I think we ought to do a biopsy here. I'm worried about this, what this is. Okay, now in a week, you've changed the probabilities. See, so now it's more likely that it's going to be benign.
Yeah. If we would have kept worrying about it, it could have had another opposite effect.
If you instead say, oh no, I bet it's cancer. Oh no, this is horrible. It's going to take me a week to get the appointment, and I'm really worried about it. Well, then you'd feed more and more higher probability of that being cancer. Indeed. Now that's how we heal people. We heal people by giving intention that what happens next is that they get better. They get rid of it. The viruses go away. That's our thing. And there's a lot of uncertainty there because biology and medicine has a lot of uncertainty in it. Human bodies are so complex. There's always a lot of uncertainty in what the human body does. Then that intention takes a random draw from the probabilities of the possibilities, and now the probabilities just moved up. It doesn't mean that you'll always get it, because it may, even though you've raised that probability of cancer, you've created that the cancer is only one chance out of 100, because you're good at this with your mind, and now it's only one chance out of 100. But it may just be that random draw pulls out that 1 in 100. You never know. It could be. But the probability is that it won't. The probability is that you'll get better and it'll be benign. So that's how you do mental healing. You're just changing the probabilities. And that's how that's what runs everything. Now, the reason it's like that is because this is not a bottoms-up simulation. You don't start with elementary particles and then do particles like atoms, or like electrons and neutrons and things, and then do atoms and then do molecules. It doesn't simulate that way. That's a crazy way to do it because it's way too much work. And as far as computer efficiency goes, it's a dead end. too difficult. Too much calculation has to be done to get the answer. Instead, you do a top-down simulation. Everything's done in terms of probability and statistics. So if it had been the bottoms up, you'd know what would be in that hole because you'd know everything. You already would have created that hole with the bottoms up. So everything would already be defined as far as you had computed. That's why if you ask a physicist and if you tell him if I knew that a physicist would tell you, I should say, that if I knew the present state vector of everything, every particle in the universe, I could tell you what would happen forever because I know where everything is and I know all the rules of how things affect each other. So then I can compute how all this has to happen. And a scientist would say that that's determinism. You can determine everything because that's the way science is. Science knows the rules, and if it knows what all the players are, then it can determine everything from there on. But that's not how the world works. So now we have a model that doesn't know what's going to happen next because it's not built from the ground up. It has to determine what's going to happen next, and it does it with probability. It takes random draws from the probability distribution of the possibilities. That's what it does. And that's how it determines what happens next. So instead of having this real big, massive calculation, all you need are some decent probability distributions and a sense of what the possibilities are. And that's not so hard to do, particularly if you've been running this game for a very long, long time. That's pretty easy, to predict that much. So that's the way the game is played. Now, you can make a probabilistic simulation very accurate if you just knew what the probability distributions were. Well, the system has the rule set. So the system knows how all the physical stuff goes because the physical stuff goes according to the rule set. And the system can do the mathematics that determines what the probabilities are. If I fire a cannon pointing this direction with this kind of barrel and this kind of charge, and this is how heavy the ball is, and I know all the facts, and I know all the facts because I'm the server that serves up this virtual reality. All that stuff already has been computed to make the information in the virtual reality. So I know all that. Then I can compute what the distribution is going to be. And I can do it in a deterministic way with the rule set. And I can do that 100,000 times. And now I have a probability distribution of how that works, how that cannon works, and where the ball goes. Now, the next time a cannon's fired, I don't need to go through all that work with the rule set. I just take a random draw. And I say, well, the cannonball went here. The next cannonball goes over there. Because all I have to do is look at the possibilities. That cannon faced that way, there were only a certain number of possibilities. The ball wasn't going to land behind the cannon. It has to land in front of where it's pointing. And it's not going to land sideways up to the cannon, but there's a distribution. And the probability of that distribution is something I can compute from the rule set. But once I know it, I don't have to compute it every time. Once I compute it once, particularly if I put parameters in there for direction and parameters in there for heat and how many shells it is fired and other things like that, then I can adjust it. And now I have a probability model of a cannon that's very accurate because it's based on the rule set, based on the physics. And I don't have to do that calculation of every molecule in the cannon and every molecule in the ball and the unevenness in the barrel. It's not really a perfect cylinder, and all the unevenness in the burning of the powder and all the unevenness, not truly a sphere, that ball that comes out of. There's all kinds of, there's just thousands of little details that make it very hard to compute accurately. Because in the real world, everything comes with bumps and knots and ugliness. In a pretend world of physics, we have perfectly, spherical balls and perfect cylinders for barrels and that sort of thing. But to do it right, you have to do it the way it really is in the world. Well, the system knows that because it's the one that renders the cannons when somebody builds one. So,
Now, Earth has gone through what we know, what we've been told, 5 extinction events. And when I hear extinction events, I almost relate it to when the creator of a video game says, "Nope, we're gonna reboot the system." And your friend Bruce Lipton, he was on the show just a couple of weeks ago. He talks about that humanity's going through a 6th mass extinction event. So what does that have to do with the larger consciousness system wanting a big reboot at points in history where it wants to, create an extinction event? What is really going on there from your perspective, from the simulation, from the video, from the virtual reality?
okay. What would be going on there? Let's say that we are evolving now in this virtual reality, and we've got to the place where dinosaurs rule the earth because they're the biggest, meanest, toughest characters around. Okay, we get to that, and the system looks at this and says, well, okay, you can have dinosaurs and frogs and whales and all the things that exist. We could play those as avatars, but they're really not the kind of avatar we want.
They were cool avatars. They were cool. They were dope.
Yeah, yeah, they're avatars, but they don't make the choices. They're pretty much hardwired. They have instincts. They just do what they do because that's what they do. And the choices they make are not that nuanced. They're not that significant. So sure, we could use them as avatars, and we can let individual units of consciousness make their choices, but that's not as profitable as if we had something that made a whole lot more choices, had a lot more thought in their process rather than instinct that drives their process. Where most of the critters, instinct drives like 80-90% of their process, and thought drives maybe the other 10 or 20% of their process. Like dogs and cats, they're obviously conscious. If you've ever had a pet, they're conscious. They have personalities. They have things they like, things they don't like. They enjoy some things and not others. And you can see they think into the future. They know things that are coming. They know, like Sheldrake pointed out, they know when you're coming home. They're in tune with us. They connect with us, consciousness to consciousness.
They read our thoughts and emotions as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we know that they are conscious, but a lot of their behavior is instinctual.
Mm.
A lot of their behavior is just the way they're made. And like all dogs do this, and so do wolves and others, and that's just the way they are. They're dogs. They're different than rabbits, and rabbits have different instincts. So the system was looking for something that had a much larger decision space, is my word for it. Decision space is all the choices you could make. Here's all the choices I can make. Okay, now humans have the largest decision space of all. We don't have the largest brain. Dolphins have bigger brains than we do, and whales have bigger brains than dolphins. But they don't have as much decision space because they don't have these opposable thumbs and fingers, and it's hard for them to build things. So humans can make all kinds of things. And all of our technology, it's all done because we're not just swimming around with fins. We manipulate stuff. We make things. We create in that function. So we have a lot of choices in the things that we can do. And with these choices, we can evolve. If we make a low entropy choice, we evolve. We make a high entropy choice, we de-evolve. Evolution goes both directions. So it wanted something more like Homo sapiens, a thinking animal that made much of its life was dominated by the choices that it made, not just by its instincts that it had just from evolving here. See? So let's say we're at that place and the dinosaurs rule the earth. The smaller mammals are having a hard time growing up because the dinosaurs eat all of them. So the other mammals that might come up are difficult for them to survive in this place of big lizards. It's not only the big dinosaurs, but all kinds of smaller dinosaurs and things that fly and things that creep and crawl and whatever that are very dangerous. So then, yes, a meteor comes from someplace and lands in the Gulf of Mexico and spews dust in the air, and the sun doesn't shine for, 3 or 4 months, and all the plants die. When the plants die, the animals die because they eat the plants. And when the plant-eating animals die, then the animals that eat the plants, they die, and the food goes away. So it kind of killed a whole lot of things. But then when it was over, what happened is that's when mammals came back. Mammals were not a big deal when the dinosaurs were running around, but after the dinosaurs left, mammals could emerge and could grow. And of course, the human is one of those mammals. There's lots of other mammals, and other stuff learned to survive better too. So the system kind of evolved itself into a corner where it wasn't getting what the system wanted, but it was kind of stuck there in that corner. When it does that, well, the system is going to mess around with that a little bit to fix it. That's what you do with simulations that you create for a purpose. If they don't serve the purpose, then you fiddle with them a little to make them serve the purpose. So dropping just the right size meteor and raising just the right size dust cloud was an easy thing to do in a virtual reality, right? It's the system owns the virtual reality. It can do whatever it wants. So it can make those kind of devices. Now, it did that, let's say, so it can purposely make adjustments. And I think it does make adjustments from time to time, but it needs to make them in the sense that they're covered up by probability. Because if this, if the people playing it want to take it really seriously, they have to see it as their life. This is my life. That's important. That's the way their attitude has to be. They can't say, hey, game maker, hey, that's creating all this, I want fudge sundaes, every day. Do this, do that. But it's just the world and it's the way it works. So it's science, the world it's evolution and it's natural. It's a natural world. So the system tries not to be heavy-handed. So it can do things, it can make changes here. It can do things by staying within the realms of the possibilities. So it has to work within the uncertainty. And within that uncertainty, it can do all kinds of things here. It can drop an NPC into the game to do a particular task. And then when that NPC is done, it can disappear. If it wants to. But it has to do all of that. It has to do all that without being noticed because it has to do it within the uncertainty of things that could happen here. So it doesn't disturb the sense of continuity here of this virtual reality. So yes, those kinds of things can be done, but they will not be done except within the natural uncertainty of the situation. That's how you're able to use your mind to, let's say, make a glass of water more or less acid. You can change the pH of water just by thinking about it. Okay? You can do that because there's uncertainty. If you had a pH meter that was really, really specific, could tell the pH of this drop of water, this cubic millimeter of water, you'd see that if you measured pH all over that glass, the pH changed. It's not uniform throughout the glass. It'd be a little higher here, a little lower there. And you have an average pH that you measure with a big blunt instrument, and the average pH is 7.2. Okay, it's a little basic. It's 7.2. We call normal 7. So it's a little basic. But actually, it's varying from 7.6 down to 6.3. You can find all of those are in there. They're all over the place. But we just look at the average. It changes. So there's uncertainty in what it is, but the uncertainty is only small. Maybe it's 7.2 to 6.8. So that would be 0.2 on either side of the line. And the uncertainty stays mostly within those lines. Well, you can bias that uncertainty. Say, well, let's move it up, but let's just move it up 0.05. All right, that's in the uncertainty, so I can move it up 0.05. Then you say, well, let's move it up another 0.05. Well, that's in the uncertainty now too, because I let it settle first. Now let's go it up another 0.05 and another 0.05. Now suddenly I've worked it up to, to 8. It's gone from 7 to 8. Now it's much more basic. But I've done it with a whole bunch of steps that are additive, and I've only done it by small increments at a time. And you can take it down and make it more acid for the same reason. So you can change things as long as you change them. You can change things with your mind by changing the probability. In my mind, when I make that thing become more base, I'm seeing more OH minuses and less H pluses in that solution. And I can change it with my intent in small amounts. So all of the changes you see have to be within the natural uncertainty of the rule set and what you see, what's come in here. So that's how you can change your reality, but it's limited. And the system limits itself. It's not going to come in there with a great monster hand and grab up all the dinosaurs and throw them away, or make all the dinosaurs shrink or shrivel so they're only little peanut-sized dinosaurs. Don't bother anybody. They have to do it in some way that's natural to the system. It has to do it that way. I don't say has to. It can do anything it wants, but that's the way it wants to do it. It wants to keep this as much a believable physical reality as possible. So it only works within the uncertainty. So yes, those kinds of things can happen if the system, and in the beginning, they happened a lot. There was a lot of twiddling in the beginning. When you set up the initial conditions in the rule set and things don't work well, you can just change. You can change whatever you want there. Let's say in the beginning, you don't use small delta t's. You use huge delta t's. You jump your delta t a decade at a time because it's just all statistics at that point. It's all these particles flinging out from the high pressure and how they change. You don't need to do it every microsecond. You can do it every decade if you like and say, well, in a decade, they'd be about here. That's close enough because any other way would be about as good. So it can just, time can go very fast for a little bit, for a small period of time, before it actually slows down. There's lots of things where the system can right some wrongs, fix a couple of things, but it does it within the uncertainty of the problem at hand. That's how it prefers to work, to be unnoticeable. There's always the legal terms, what's it called? There's always deniable, what is it? It's, there is a legal term that talks about it. Deniable something, deniable possibilities, or deniable, that it's a something.
Yeah, I studied business.
Yeah, did you? If you can deny that that you didn't have to be you weren't the culprit. It could have happened some other way. Deniable probability, deniable culpability. I don't know. Anyway, there's a legal term for it. But the system always can deny that it was ever there, that it didn't just happen through the natural process. It tries to not show its hand. Keeps this a virtual reality that is credible. So I don't know what Bruce told you, but yes, probably some of the big places where life died out and we don't understand why probably were engineered. Trying to get this virtual reality game to produce the kind of avatars that it needed probably wasn't just going to happen by itself. It probably had to be nudged along a lot of places for it to actually work out. So that wouldn't be a surprise. Like I say, NPCs can be dropped in for special duty when they need to, but they don't make big entrances. They make entrances in the shadows where nobody knows that they're there and they exit the same way.
Have you ever interacted with one of those NPCs that you're talking about? The non-playable
I've been
character?
an, I've been an NPC.
Okay.
What I mean by that is I've gone to other worlds. This virtual reality isn't the only virtual reality. It would be foolish to put all your eggs in one basket. So there are other virtual realities, and you can go to those virtual realities, and they're physical realities like this one with tight rule sets. And if you have a good working relationship with the LCS, he'll put you into the data stream. And now you've got a body in that reality, and your body is a body just like the other things that evolved there, and you can interact with them. So to them, I'm an NPC. I don't belong there. I didn't get born there and grow up there. I just snuck in, and I'm just there to visit, to see, to look and see what are the possibilities.
Can you
How does the system
interfere
work?
in other worlds, or are you just observing?
No, I'm told not to interfere. I'm told not to make a scene. I'm told not to screw anything up. Otherwise, it won't do that. It won't put me in. I can't just force my way into that reality. I have to be put into the reality. The LCS has to put me into its rendering engine to get me in that.
And how do you create a good
So,
relationship with the larger consciousness system?
yeah, you can create a good relationship by growing up, becoming love, doing the things it wants to do, and helping other people do the same thing. That's the point. That's the purpose. You got a system whose purpose is to not de-evolve back into random bits. So it has to keep evolving by getting more and more, better and better connections, making better choices. The whole system does that. So the system has an incentive for me to succeed and for you to succeed. And if you succeed well and you have a 30-year, 40, 50-year relationship, dude, I got probably a 50-year relationship, 60-year relationship with the LCS.
Man, you're brothers now. You're like
Yeah,
first name basis out here.
Yeah, exactly. We work together, and he knows that I will go to every extent possible to not be a problem, to not be an entropy creator. So no, I'm not going to go in and meddle with things and screw things up, because that doesn't happen that way. Now, people imagine that happens, but all of the NPCs that go here are sent by the larger consciousness system because they have to be insinuated into the data stream.
For a specific purpose, or
Usually for a specific purpose. Yeah, and you read and hear about these specific purposes all the time. An old Lassie episode comes to mind, and of course that was fiction, but these kinds of things happen. And I know one that wasn't, I know several that aren't fiction. And that is Timmy's out wandering around, he falls in a well, and he's a couple of miles from home. And everybody knows he's missing. They go search for him, but they can't find him. A stranger shows up, throws him down a rope or something, pulls Timmy up, says, "Are you all right, Timmy?" And Timmy's all right, so he pats him on the rump and sends him on home. Timmy shows up and says, "Yeah, a man came and did that." "What man?" He didn't know. He was a stranger. "Well, we didn't see any strangers around here, and maybe they're the only town around for 30 or 40 miles, Well, nobody knows. The stranger came. Well, that's probably an NPC. There was a guy that made a really good story about he got trapped in the woods. He went out hiking on a rough trail. A rock moved, pinned his hand. He couldn't get out. He was stuck. He had a little bit of water and not a way that he was going to live a really long time, but he had to get loose. And just when he was almost done, some guy shows up. And the interesting thing about this guy is he wasn't dressed in climbing clothes or boots. He had on dress slacks and a pair of, business shoes and that kind of stuff. And he shows up and he walks over and he helped him get things together, got some water for him so he'd last a little longer. And he says, there's going to be a search party here in just a few minutes. So just hang on, he was about ready to die. I says, just hang on a little while later and a search party will be here. So he did. And he did a few other things. I think he maybe stopped the bleeding someplace it was bleeding, so he gave him a little first aid, and and I don't know that he got his hand loose, but he did a few things just to make him hang on a little bit. And then the people who were searching for him came, and they were a patrol, and they didn't think he was in that area at all. That had been written off as impossible. He couldn't have gotten that far this time for some reason. So they heard these noises. So they'd move toward the noise, and then they heard a noise again further on. So they moved toward the noise. They were way off track, but they kept doing this until eventually they found this guy. So
Yeah. And when you go into these other worlds, for example, are you called in for a specific purpose, like helping someone get out of
no, never called in to help somebody. If the system wants that, they just create an NPC to go in there. It's just too easy to do that. I go there because I'm curious. I want to know what other realities are like. And the LCS is agreed that the more I know about the nature of reality, the better I'll be able to explain it to others. So if I want to go just to look around and to see how it works, then I have to get permission, and he puts me in the rendering engine.
Yeah. Is it like a parallel version of Earth that you're going into?
No.
Completely different planet?
No, it's just different reality frame, not planets. Doesn't have anything to do with planets. It's not this physical universe. It's some other physical universe. Yeah. It's not a planet thing.
And in terms of the evolution of the consciousness on other systems, on other universes, where do you see the difference with this one in specific?
Well, in general, there's a lot of similarities to those. There's lots of different virtual realities out there. Some of them have tight rule sets. Some of them have very loose rule sets. The virtual reality that you play in when you're dreaming has a loose rule set. You can fly in that virtual reality. You can teleport. You can do all kinds of things you can't do here. You can manifest things there much more easily than you can here. This reality has what I call a very tight rule set. The rules define almost everything. Everything we do is defined by the rules somehow. Very tight rule set. Other places that have very tight rule sets don't necessarily have creatures like we do. Some don't have humanoids like we do. But they've all evolved to have some intelligence. Otherwise, the system would either, they wouldn't be usable yet. So they are usable systems they send me to. So the rule sets have to be very similar. The system hasn't found like 100 ways to make rules that you get a really stable universe out of it. It's, all those numbers that had to be tuned, to 10 decimal places. It's not just that easy just to make something that is going to be stable enough to give you something that you want. So a lot of the basics are about the same. So they're using similar rules and similar initial conditions to produce similar things. They evolve somewhat differently because that's just the circumstances of what happens to grow when. That evolution depends on the environment and how the environment changes. So they appear differently. But as far as their evolution goes, as far as their intent becoming love, that is generally not quite as developed as it is here. Most of the ones I see are still struggling just like we have for 200,000 years been struggling. They've been struggling to get to that point as well. That's the way it is for most. I've been to some that are a little nicer than here. I have been to some that are definitely much worse than here. I think there was some that got pretty far down that evolutionary path and then regressed, de-evolved quite a bit.
What determines if a civilization de-evolves?
Well, if you get the evolution, we evolve by making better choices. If we make worse choices, we de-evolve. So we make worse choices if more of us are making bad choices. Right now, business, right now, the term business ethics has become an oxymoron. There's almost no ethics in business. Business is lie, cheat, and steal. Tell the customer whatever he needs to know whatever you want him to know to buy your product. Give him as little a product as possible. What I say, spend as little money on the product as possible to make the most. It's all about the profit. It's not about the relationship. It's not about other people. It's not about anybody's safety or health. It's about how much money you make and how much profit you get. And if you're a bank and you can say, well, now we have the, you know, this kind of fee, just make a fee up. Now we have it that if your bank account gets less than this much, we'll charge you a fee. We'll call that a handling fee or a low account fee or something. Well, it causes them zero work. They don't have to do anything. The computer will determine whether the account is above that level or not, and the computer will assess the fee and send out the bill. They do nothing, basically. And yet they're pouring in money for nothing just because they're tricking people into doing things. So when you have that kind of an attitude what lying and get away with it is clever, not wrong. It's the old Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox scenario where the one's always outsmarting the other one and tricking the other one, and that's good. So if you can lie, cheat, and steal and win, that's okay. So the only thing wrong about telling lies is getting caught. So just don't get caught. And business pretty much runs on that idea that it'll squeeze as much profit as it possibly can out. If it can make a product that's half the cost but twice as dangerous, I think it'll make that product.
And that's the same in other realities, the way that businesses are run?
Well, I haven't really run into much business there. Most of them are kind of where we were 700 years ago, 800 years ago. There isn't a lot of business like we think of business here. But yes, that's the thing. So if you do this, let's say if your whole culture's that way, your whole culture's lie, cheat, and steal, then people grow up thinking lying, cheating, and stealing is okay if you get away with it. Well, then the whole society starts to de-evolve. And de-evolve. And if it de-evolves the point to you can go over and shoot your neighbor and claim his house and say, all right, this is my house now. And you get away with it just because you got a bunch of people that are dangerous. So the people that might come arrest you and take you away don't bother because they don't want to get hurt. So they just leave it. Well, now the whole thing slides down, you see. So you get closer and closer to chaos and going back to the law of the jungle. Anything you can take is yours. Well, that's de-civilizing, that's de-evolving. And choosing fear. Fear is the thing you want to be. You want to be fearful. You want everybody to fear you. If everybody fears you, then you can take whatever you want. Nobody will say anything different because they fear you. So it's playing to fear, not playing to love. Well, we had to dig ourselves out of that hole. Slowly, over 200,000 years.
Trial and error.
To a point we're trial and error. We're not all that way. We see a better way. And right now, some people would say we're going backwards. But I think we're not really going backwards at this point. I think the growth line is not a steady line. It zigs and it zags, and sometimes you go back and then you go forward again. And sometimes you have to hit the bottom to see how bad it is, and you really don't want to go that way, and then you go forward again. So it's like that. And I think right now the sides that are negative and fear driven see the end possible, that they're going to be in a very small minority, and they're giving it their full. It's like the last big roar, the big flurry of what when you have an animal cornered and it sees its ends near, it puffs up and gives it its last big rush, where It doesn't really expect to win, but it's going to go out trying. And I think that's really where the negativity is right now. They're giving it the last big hurrah before they lose this struggle, and that's not a given. But I see that as a possibility, and that things are getting better because I see an undercurrent to all the negativity going on. That negativity itself is creating an undercurrent to fight it. And negativity is like that. Negativity is fundamentally unstable. Negativity in like building cultures or processes or economic systems. Where they're negative, they self-destruct. They don't last long because they create their own destruction. Because of their negativity, they create the very, going for the, I want everything, I want to own everything, I want to own the world. They make so many people miserable and unhappy that eventually they get overrun. They get their head chopped off and somebody else goes in there and takes up their place and wants to do the same thing. So it it's not a stable system. Love is stable. Caring, cooperation, that's a stable system. So it's slow, but it very slowly builds. And the negativity basically crumbles itself as it goes along. I mean, look at dictatorship. We've had a lot of them because that's the that's the mold we come out of. But if you look at them, they don't last that long. Dictators are not long-lived people. They don't last that long. Somebody else wants that job. They shoot that dictator. Now they're the dictator. Somebody else shoots them. And then the people get tired of all that and they elect another dictator. And then they have to elect another one because that one didn't work out. But the dictators are a short lived species because dictatorship itself is dysfunctional. It's wrong, it's negative, and it self destructs. So all of this stuff that you have our industry and our business doing that's destructive and lying and cheating and stealing, that at the same time as it strengthens their pocketbooks, it's weakening their what? Weakening their ability to survive, really, because they become more and more targets of change. And in order to do that, they try harder and harder to keep the same, to make better rules. But it's just going to make people more and more determined to overcome. And eventually we will overcome, just like the song says. We will. It's inevitable because the negative can't grow but so much. The positive has no limits. So it's a slow process, but we're at the point now of pushing it over that knife edge cliff so that the ball will just roll down that positive side. We're you were close to that. Like I say, two or three decades could do that.
Some of the
Pardon me.
no worries. Some of the greatest thinkers of different several generations, thinking people like Da Vinci, they will create a space for new inventions to come in that completely change the trajectory or timeline for the whole civilization. Think of Steve Jobs when he, with the iPhone and things like that. So where do you think these thinkers are getting their inspiration from? Because
same place everybody gets their inspiration from.
Where is that?
Same way that you get your inspiration to do what you're doing, and I get the inspiration to do what I'm doing, and that authors writing fiction, they get their inspirations. Artists get their inspirations. It all comes out of that intuitive side. Inspiration is part of us realizing that we are consciousness, that consciousness is a creator, it's a builder. And if you just let it flow, if you can get your intellect, get out of the way and let it flow, then you can create things that you would never create with an intellect. Artists are of all sorts of artists do their work with inspiration that flows out of their intuitive side. It's just part of us. It's part of what we are. And anybody who Even athletes, I guess they're physical artists, maybe you could call them. They can do marvelous things, but they will tell you that if they're throwing that javelin or lifting that weight, they have to have their mind in the right space to do that. They'll tell you it's 80 or 90% mental. The rest of it's just training. Anybody can train. Anybody can train. If you want to take the time to train, you'll get stronger and you'll lift more weight or throw a javelin further if you train. But the people who get the gold, the people who go to the top, are people who also train their minds. So it's not like, well, this is a good day for me, but tomorrow probably won't be because I only have like one good day a month where I excel and the rest of the time I'm average. They train their minds so that they can excel every time. And that is a tough thing for most athletes to do. And they're not in the right mental space often when they have to perform because they don't always choose the time of their performance. They're in a lineup. Now it's your turn. Go perform. And if you can't control that mental space, then you don't do well. So it's a mental game, and that's the same inspiration. You have to let that mental space tell you how to act and what to do, what's next. That's that connection to the intuitive mind. I said that we never bother to develop it if we don't give it any value. That's that's important. Now, I really was heading toward answering your question, so let me move it to that point. You wanted to know about how are we going to get there? What are the primary pieces that have to fall into place for us to get there in that two decades or 3 decades or so? And what are the pieces and why are they important? Well, first, one of the important pieces was the internet. Creating the internet was an important piece because what that allows is for the possibility of things that are in the margins to get into the mainstream. Before, that was almost impossible. Most good ideas stayed out in the margins. Only a few of them work their ways into the mainstream, and that only happens very slowly. The the attitude of people seeing everybody else as their brother and sister, seeing everybody else as fellow humans on this trip together, that that was very hard when there were people even hundreds of miles away that, just you didn't know anything about them. You didn't care about them. Oh, there was a big earthquake over in, such and such a part of the world. 100,000 people died. Who cares? Never been there, don't know anything about it, doesn't have anything to do with me. My life goes on as usual. Now the internet solved that. Now everything that happens, good, bad, anywhere, it's right in your face. You can look into the eyes of those children who just lost their parents in a tsunami or something. And when you look into their eyes, it's different than hearing about it in a newspaper. Very different. So you get out your checkbook and you send the Red Crescent or the Red Cross or somebody else, you know, the Doctors Without Borders. You send money to those people because you really do care. They're people just like you. You can connect with them. So the internet has made the world shrink down to the size of a village. See, and that's necessary. In a village, that happens. Everybody cares about everybody else in a village. Everybody knows everybody else, so everybody's your friend, so to speak. Everybody's connected, and you all work together. So you have that kind of village has to be small enough that you care about everyone. Well, the earth needs to be small enough that we care about everyone. And that only happens when our senses, when we can hear, see, smell, feel, touch everything that's going on in the world. Well, now we can at least see it and hear it. That's a really big start. And that makes us care about people more than we used to care about people. It makes us see humanity Homo sapiens as a tribe. It changes the way you look at things. So the internet's been very powerful tool to bring us together. It also has created all kinds of scams and pornography and other things that have had negative effects in the culture. But it's had that effect that things now can get out of the margins into the mainstream quickly. New ideas, new ways of looking at things, new concepts. You can take a guy like Eckhart Tolle, and nobody ever heard of him. He gets tied up with what's her name? Made him famous. Oprah. He gets noticed by Oprah. Gets put up in Oprah in front of millions of people, and now Eckhart Tolle is known all over the world. Lots of people know about Eckhart Tolle. He went from 200 people knew he existed to 200 million people have read his books, know he exists. He went from the margins into the mainstream quickly. That was impossible before there wasn't internet. So things like that can travel very quickly. The things that are now going on in Ukraine, instead of people saying, yeah, but that's way over there and it really doesn't have anything to do with us, we see, no, that's not true. It does have something to do with us. It's part of the same, fight that we've been, of the people trying to live nicely together and people trying to bully their way into dictatorship roles that we've been doing for the last 200,000 years. It's a part of us. It's a very much a part of us. It'll help us grow. If they succeed, it'll be more easy for others to succeed. It'll be harder for the bullies to continue to bully. So yes, it is important. And a lot of people see that now, that they see the connection and they realize that it's not just about us, our friends, our community, which is the way it was before TV, radio, and internet. It was just the neighborhood was important and the town was important. Country, maybe. That was even too big. But now the world's getting to be important. So it's good. So that's one reason that we could break into the mainstream. If you just went out into the world and randomly, if you had all the people in the world, if you just could randomly connect with them, you'd probably find that the great majority would tell you that no, our institutions and our governments are not perfect. They could be much better. Our infrastructure, our water, garbage collection, all the stuff, all the services and things that communities need, they're not very good. They could be so much better. But if you say, well, then why not make them better? People would say, well, don't know how. Don't know how to make them better. I can't make them better. I'm just a nobody. I can't make them better. I could go out and stand on a street corner and hold a sign, but all that'll do is get ridicule and I lose my job. I really can't make them better. So you have this kind of an attitude. But see, as it turns out, all of those things that aren't happening, that are being done poorly, all of the things that make our world problematic, the lying, the cheating, the stealing of the people in business and the people in politics and the people in news and just everywhere, trying to get ahead. People make stuff up and get ahead. They don't think about others so much. It's all self-centered. They get richer, they get promoted, they get whatever. It's self-centered. All of those are symptoms. If you take that evil dictator and replace him with some random guy off the street, eventually you'll just end up with another evil dictator. The difference between that evil dictator and the guy in the street is that the evil dictator has a lot of power and the guy in the street doesn't have any power at all. But other than that, they're not all that different. And we realize that the problem is not evil dictators and evil CEOs and bad politicians. We think that's the problem, but it's not. Those are all symptoms of the problem. The problem is low quality of consciousness. That's the problem. If you fixed the quality of consciousness in every individual, all of those other things would take care of themselves. Those people are just like us. They just happen to have power. Many of us, if we had that power, would abuse it. Some of us wouldn't, but most would. So, what do? Well, we need to raise the level of consciousness. Well, how do you do that? Well, you cannot force anybody to change. People have to change themselves. When you level up in consciousness, when your quality of consciousness grows by even just a little bit, it's because you have changed yourself. Consciousness quality is made from the inside out. It's nothing that can be pushed into you from the outside in. Now, from the outside in, we can push into you, we can demand behavior. All right, you must be polite. You must say please and thank you. You must do this and must. What that does is create more civilized people, but it doesn't raise their quality of consciousness. We're not talking about acting. We're talking about being. There's a big difference between acting kind, which can be forced. Everybody that I don't see acting kind, I'm going to throw them in jail. So you better be acting kind when I'm watching. See? If acting kind is a problem, then most people would act kind. That's a long way from being kind. Being kind is something you have inside yourself. So you can act civilized and you can act kind, but that doesn't get you any distance at all in a better quality of consciousness. You have to be kind. That's the only thing that will solve the problem, because there's all kinds of people who are good actors, and they may act kind and they may act competent and they may act like they're going to save the world, and when they get there, they're big disappointments because they're acting. Those are the things they needed to say to get where they wanted to go.
Has to come from within.
Yeah, it has to come from within. So what it is that the way you save the world is to fix yourself. That's how you save the world. It's the only way you can save the world is to raise your own quality of consciousness, to get rid of your fear and become one closer step to becoming love, caring about people, making your life more about others than about yourself. That's the only way. Nobody can force you to be other than you are. They can change your behavior, but they can't change who you are. You have to do that yourself. So, for that guy who says he can't change anything because he's small, no, he is the thing that needs to change. He can best save the world by saving himself. He can best save everybody here by growing up. And if he grows up, what happens is that he becomes a little bit of light in a lot of grayness and darkness. And people want to be like him because he's happier, he's more content, he's more satisfied. Life is good to him. Things fall at his feet just as he needs them. It's like magic. How do you do that? Well, you just become love, and that's the way the world works. If you become love, everything you need falls at your feet. And not necessarily everything you want, but everything you need. Those wants start to disappear. They're not important anymore. So if you want to save the world, you can do it. Just save yourself. And if you don't save yourself, if you say, well, let other people do that, they've got more time for it. For me, I'm too busy with 3 jobs. No excuse. If you don't save yourself, then you're part of the problem. You're one of the people that gets angry when those politicians, do something that makes your life harder. Or those businessmen make something that you have to pay more for less. You get angry and you wave your fist and you want to, You want to cause a revolt, and you fuss and moan, but all of that's part of the problem. If you get angry, I don't care what your reason is for getting angry. If you get angry, you're part of the problem. There is no reason for getting angry. Anger is never helpful. So you have to become love. And if you do, you'll help the other people around you also make changes in themselves. And if a lot of people do that, then more people will act that way. And the more people that act that way, the more people that'll act that way. It's a it's a something that grows itself. All you have to do is change yourself. And that's your optimal contribution. There's no other way to make a bigger contribution. You can go out and put up big banners and get ads that say, change yourself, but that won't really help anybody change themselves. They have to decide that that's what they want to do inside. So what you can do is create an environment that makes it easier for people to change themselves. And that's an environment where they don't feel so stressed, where they're not feeling that they're in a battle, that they are loved, taken care of, supported to a point that they can think some bigger thoughts. And then they can change themselves. You see, so that's what the advantage of having nice space is. You go someplace where the lawns are pretty and the trees are pretty and the weather is nice and you get a really lovely space and you feel so good there. Then you go back to your job and everything's not nice and people are angry and back to the grind and everything's not so good there. Well, it's those nice spaces help you become nicer.
Yeah.
You feel happier. Well, create a nice space around yourself.
Yeah.
You can do that.
And can you be the love amongst the chaos, amongst the entropy?
Yeah. It was attributed to Gandhi. You have to be the change that you want to see in the world. That's it. You have to be it. If you are the change you want to see in the world, it will happen. And with the internet, an idea like that can go mainstream. You see? And if it went mainstream, you'd have a whole lot of happier people. And the negativity would just not be such a big deal. You would easily, your life would become good, happy, all you need. Now, we don't measure happiness by income level. Happiness isn't how much money you have. Matter of fact, people who are very wealthy tend to not be very happy. Those two are kind of contradictory to each other. Depends on the attitude. The attitude they have toward their resources is power, control. I can control everything. I'm on the top of the hill. And they will be unhappy being on top of the hill. If they have a lot of resources and they say, gee, I was at the right place at the right time and I have all these resources, let me share them in a way that's most helpful. Let me keep my resources so that I can keep control and make sure that they keep being used in a positive direction. And it's different. So there's nothing wrong with being rich. Being rich is fine. I'm not advocating for everybody taking up putting on a hooded, what is it, getting a wooden bowl going around begging. That's not the point.
Yeah.
You can do this in any lifestyle you have. You don't have to go to an ashram and find quality there. You can stay in whatever job you have. You can do whatever you do. And your life, you can start adding quality to it right there. And then things will change. Your life will change. But you don't have to change by going to an ashram or reading my book or anything else. That's not the point. The point isn't what you do, it's what you are. And if you are love, then things will come to you. Things will work out. That's just the nature that we have. So everybody can contribute their greatest contribution to making the world a better place just by being more considerate, more caring, more giving, more loving, more cooperative with other people. By not getting angry. Now, you can know that you're in trouble, that you live in a lot of fear if you ever feel negativity. Do you ever get angry? Do you ever get upset? Do you ever feel insecure? Do you ever feel not wanted, not valued enough? You know, that sort of thing. Not good enough. People who have negative feelings. Do you want to? Do you have this need to reach out and fix the world? Because of course you know how it should be fixed. That's just arrogance. Everybody would like to go out and fix the world, and everybody thinks they know how it should be fixed. Everybody on every side of every issue is trying to fix things the way they want them fixed, the way it's best. Well, the best thing you can really do for the world is to fix yourself. That's the only thing you have control over, complete control over. So just work on yourself. That's the key. You see, so the little guy can do something. Matter of fact, he can do as much as anybody else can do. He's got all the ability to do as much as anybody has to do. And no, it's not that, well, I'm just one and it won't matter. It does matter that everybody does this. If everybody helps, the world would change in a year. Change would be dramatic. Change would just be very dramatic. And in 5 or 10 years, you would not even recognize the place if you could get people to just increase the quality of their consciousness just even one step. That's the key. That's how the internet, excuse me, the internet is just one of those things that's never been there before for humanity. There's always been people who've gotten it. Like I say, 2,500 years ago, the Buddha got it.
Without the internet, he got it.
Mm-hmm. But without the internet, the Buddha stayed. Without the internet, the Buddha stayed in the margins.
Yeah.
Majority of people, and even probably the majority of Buddhists, don't really follow the path that Buddha laid out. So it just doesn't, it stays in the margins. Even if it grows into a big organization, it stays in the margins. So that's one of the things that had to come about. Now, the other thing that had to come about is this understanding that people have that love is the answer. And this always has been a philosophical position, a religious position. Love is the answer. You need to be more caring and more cooperative. That's been it's been an opinion, not a fact. Okay, it's always been an opinion. There's always somebody else to say, no, that's nonsense. You don't be that way. What you need to be is selfish. Ayn Rand, you need to be selfish. Everybody out for themselves. That's how you make things better. All those bleeding hearts just make everything worse. So it's always been opinions. Now it isn't. Now it's science. It's not an opinion anymore. It's a fact. And the fact is that consciousness is fundamental. If consciousness is fundamental, then this is a virtual reality. It's the only way consciousness can really be fundamental, is that this is a virtual reality. If this is a virtual reality, then we know what the scientists say when they say this information, this reality is information based. Of course it's information based. It's a virtual reality. It's information based. So we already have the scientists gone that far. When the scientists, who are the high priests of Western culture, I call them that because the high priests have always been the ones that told everybody else in the culture what to believe. And now it's the scientists that are believed. Whatever the scientists say, everybody tends to believe. So when those scientists who now understand that reality is information-based but don't know what to do with it understand that consciousness is the computer, this is a virtual reality, then it's very simple logic to say that consciousness is an information system. Obviously, it's running the virtual reality. That information systems evolve by lowering their entropy. Lowering your entropy means becoming love, caring for each other. All these are just logical. A low entropy system is one that works together well. High entropy system, it's everybody's trying to grab as much as they can for themselves. See, so caring for others is the low entropy solution. So if you look at that and you can say, okay, we are in a virtual reality, and our mission here in this virtual reality is to become love. That's why we're here. We make choices, and by those choices, we evolve toward becoming love, or we de-evolve toward becoming fear. And that's the game we're in. That's the name of this game we're in, called Earth and life and so on. And the way you win is by leveling up to become love, to become more caring. All right. Now, if that is not just an opinion, that's a fact based on science. Science says all these things. Then that'll become mainstream. People will pay attention to that if that's a science and that's a fact, not just somebody's opinion of the way the world should work. So, see, it's all a string. So when the scientists get up there and make that declaration that, okay, this is a virtual reality, it's computed in consciousness, because that's just better physics. With my model, I can derive consciousness. I can explain quantum physics. Physicists today think quantum physics is weird physics. It's unexplainable. And they'll say, nobody will ever explain quantum physics. It's just weird how that double slit experiment works. I can explain exactly why that double slit experiment works. And they say that, what is this? The wave function collapses to a physical particle. The probability wave collapses to a physical particle. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Probability wave is just mathematics. Mathematics can't collapse to a physical particle. That's just a metaphor they've made up because they can't think of anything else better to say. But what happens is that a random draw is taken from a probability distribution of all the possibilities. That's what happens. That's what creates what's here. That's what creates. That's how you find something new. So it's not that a wave function collapses to something. That's the math can explain it that way, but math is not reality. So the thing is that my model solves the problem of how those five constants all got to be tuned with each other. And it solves a whole bunch of other problems. There's a whole host of them. Why is the speed of light a constant? That's the whole thing that relativity is built out of that fact. But nobody knows why that ought to be that way. It's that way because you're in a simulation. You're on a grid, delta t and delta x. Time moves forward by little delta t's. X can only move forward pixel at a time, a little delta x's. The fast that you can move through any virtual reality contiguously from one to the next, without jumping around, teleporting, is that you go one delta x for every delta t. That's it. So if you go one delta x for every delta t, that's your speed limit in that virtual reality, whatever your delta x and delta t is. Now, our delta x is called the Planck length, and our delta t is called the Planck time. And when you divide the Planck length by the Planck time, you get speed of light. That's one delta x for one delta t. So why is that a constant? The nature of virtual reality. It's a constant because you can't move through the grid any faster than that. So physicists don't know why that's that way. And the virtual reality, the speed of light is known to change every now and again since we've been capable of measuring it to enough decimal places. Out in its like 8th or 9th or 10th decimal place, I don't recall, but it's out in the far decimal places. It changes a little bit now and again. Sometimes a little bigger, sometimes a little smaller. It changes. Well, delta x over delta t is our measure of resolution in the system. If you want your system to have higher resolution, you have smaller delta x's and smaller delta t's, right? Now, a system that is very conscious about its efficiency wants to have just the resolution it needs, no more. A simulation, virtual reality. You don't want to be able to measure everything to 10 to the minus 100 meters when all you're doing is modeling people walking through a field full of mud. It's not necessary. And you don't need a delta time of 10 to the minus, 44 seconds if you're just modeling people walking through a field of mud. Nothing happens much between delta t's, if that much. So it's way too much resolution. So the system runs at less resolution, but it can go all the way to delta t and delta x. So now sometimes when physicists start blasting particles into each other and seeing what comes out the other end, like they do at CERN, we start looking at smaller and smaller parts of the world. And when we do, the system has to increase our resolution. It has to do computations with our resolution at a higher resolution in order to get the results. So it produces a little different delta t and delta x. Now, one would think that if you just say, if I divide delta t by 2 and divide delta x by 2, now both are smaller by the same amount, and the speed of light will stay the same. If you divide delta x by delta t, you still get the same c, speed of light. So why not just change both of them by the same amount and keep speed of light the same? Well, we can do that, but we can't do it exactly because we're dealing with digital things here, not continuous things. You can only change delta t by half until you run into a half a pixel. You can't have half a pixel. So you can divide it by 2 as close as you can, but not precisely, because you get to a point where you need to be smaller than a pixel. So there's going to be a little difference there. And the same with delta x. So when you want to raise the resolution of the virtual reality so they can do something like smash particles together and measure what comes out, then you have to raise it by lowering delta x and delta t a certain amount, no more than you need, but you want to keep the same c. Can't do it perfectly. You're going to be, if I move the c 1 pixel higher, it would be too high, and 1 pixel lower, it would be too low. To make it right where I want it, it has to be between pixels. Well, that's not possible. So I'll make it just a little high. Well, now the speed of light just moves just a little bit in that 9th decimal place. And it only does that for places where it needs to do that. If you don't need that kind of resolution, then the system doesn't compute it that fine. But sometimes, some places, it does. And when you set up equipment to measure the speed of light, let's say they can measure speed of light to 15 decimal places now. Well, a change in the 8th or 9th or 10th decimal place is serious. That's not just measurement error. That's a real change. But that's as close as they could get by changing the resolution. The amount that they wanted to do things where people start digging deeper and deeper into cellular structure, into biology, into the world. We dig more and more into the details, which means the system has to create something there, just like in outer space. When somebody looks at that telescope, it creates something there. Something has to be there. So you random draw from those distributions. Well, that's the way it is in going tiny too. Okay, what comes out when you smash these particles, or when you pull those cells apart, or get down into pieces of cells? What do you find there? Well, the system has to put something there. It takes a random draw from the probability distribution of the possibilities. And that's what we find there. But that's done at a much smaller resolution. So it helps us by making our world have that higher resolution so we can understand those facts. And then it makes the resolution much smaller when we don't have to understand those facts. Because otherwise it'd be wasting a lot of time simulating things that only change per second by measuring it in billionths of a second. It's just wasting cycles. You only want the resolution that's necessary for what you're doing. So this virtual reality doesn't have necessarily the same resolution everywhere all the time. It just has the resolution it needs when it needs it. So that's another thing. But anyway, there's lots of those. I've got a list. I'm making a list, and I'm going to talk to all of them individually. And right now, I think I've got at least 30 and more of them popping up every day. So I'm going to have like 40 or 50 of these paradoxes that we know are true, but we don't know why they're true. And my model explains every one of them. So that's why I started to believe that my model was probably right. When I first put my model out there, I just put it out as a model. Look, this is how the world could work. But the more and more I applied it to things, I've got all this fact that I can answer questions that nobody else can answer. And that then started me thinking, well, maybe this isn't just a model. Maybe this is the model. Now, I don't propose that nobody's going to be able to make it better. Of course, models need to grow. They're living things. But as a model, it's done remarkably well in what it can do. Now, there's lots of other models out there about reality and how reality should be. Hundreds of models, but none of them can tell scientists why speed of light's a constant. why how quantum physics, what does it mean when the probability wave collapsed to a particle? What's really going on there? Mine can, and a host of other things as well.
Where would you send people to connect with the model, the My Big Theory of everything?
Well, the first place would be send them to my website and send them to the book, because in the book they'll get all the basic theory. But I didn't do a lot of science in the book because this was a book for everybody. It was a book meant for the common person. I didn't want to write a book for physicists. That's not going to do much good. Those guys are pretty hopeless anyway. I was going to do books for people who would understand it, and so I wrote it for everybody. But it's a tough read for everybody because it's dense with information. And if you're right-brained and very intuitive, you may struggle with it a lot because it's meant for left brain logical process guys, because they don't have an on-ramp to this sort of thing. They don't have an on-ramp to the intuitive side. They see intuitive work and they just don't get what it is. It's nonsense. Okay, let's see. There's this guy and he's on a chariot, right? And he's in a war. And, this is what is it? And I said, when you get old, your short-term memory just disappears. A shot full of holes. The things that I would know aren't there. But anyway, they read the religious texts and the philosophy text and just say, it's just somebody's opinion, but where are the facts? I don't see the facts. Show me the proof. Well, science isn't really about proof. The only thing that's about proof is mathematics and whiskey. Mathematics and booze, they're about proof. But science is about evidence, not about proofs. Science should never come to proof. It's not that science proves things. Science has a lot of evidence for things, because you have to realize that all the evidence isn't in yet. How do you know there's not going to be evidence in the future that what you think is right is wrong? It's like Newton. He had physics all figured out until quantum physics came along, and now all of Newton's physics isn't right anymore. But he had laws. He had laws of physics. Well, we don't say laws in physics anymore because we learned that lesson. Nothing is for sure. Everything is a model. Everything is a theory, and everything could change later on from a bigger viewpoint. So physics talks about, How reasonable is this? How well does it work? How well does it describe our reality? If it describes our reality really, really well and it answers questions we can't answer, then it's a good model. How many assumptions does it have? Well, if it has a lot of assumptions, it's not a good model. And that's why string theory kind of ended up on a trash pile, because lots of assumptions. Every dimension they have is another assumption. They have all these assumptions, and they don't really explain anything. They almost explain a whole lot of things, but they don't actually explain anything. So that's kind of gotten less and less. I mean, it's still part of physics. Who knows? Physics has to be open-minded, that there may be information that comes up later that makes what you think is right is wrong, like materialism. That's wrong. And a lot of physicists think it's right. That's
I had a final question for you, Tom, that I know you've been exploring this in so many, like for the last 40 years, and compiling this theory, compiling everything together, this model. I'm wondering, what is something that you are still seeking right now? Because I've heard you use the term seeker before. Is there one thing that you're still seeking to explore right now?
what I'm seeking right now is how to get these ideas into the mainstream. that's my main focus right now. I've pretty much explored all of reality in a lot of ways that people would never even imagine. So I've done a lot of that. The model that I have has turned out to be a really good one. I didn't know that until it actually produced facts that other models could not produce. So it's the best model around now for understanding the nature of reality. It's the best physics. It's a more advanced physics than the physics that we have now. And it gives us a a an objective science of subjectivity. Now there is a science of the subjective world as well. And it's all about the fear thing, the dichotomy between fear and love. Problems people have are because of fear. Love is what you have left after you get rid of the fear. So it's a matter of peeling off this fear. But you can take almost all the entries that aren't organic in a book of mental illnesses, and all of them can be reduced to fear. If you could get rid of the fear, you'd solve all these problems. See, so it's a anyway, that's just more meandering around. What I'd really like to do is get it into the mainstream, and I'm trying to work on that. I'm trying to figure out how to get it into the mainstream, that people see that their life doesn't have to be full of struggles. Life doesn't have to be one struggle after the next, one obstacle after the next you have to get through. And this idea that, well, if I could just get by this next obstacle, if I could just, make $100,000 a year, I just, everything would just go great. Well, it won't. Nothing will grow great, no matter how much money you make or how much other things go right. They're just not going to work out until you grow up. And when you grow up, everything you do will work out. Everything you do will fall into place nicely, and you'll keep on growing. So if you really want to find happiness, if you want to find a sense of a sense of being a contributor to the world, a sense of value added to the things that you do, then this is the only way to do it. You have to care about other people. You have to not be so self-centered. You have to not go around fixing everybody else. You have to start on yourself. And if you do that, you'll be just shocked at how that fixes problems. All the people around you will start to act nicer to you. You'll find your relationships all get better. Your children will like you better. Your husband will like you better. Your own parents will like you better. Everybody will like you better, and your boss will like you better. Your relationships everywhere will just get better. And I know it sounds like magic when say whatever you need falls in your lap just as you need it, but that's true. That becomes a fact. And you will just live a life like that. You just have to change your perspective. Your perspective is that, nobody takes care of number one but you, so you make sure you take care of yourself first and let everything else go until you get you taken care of. That is the perspective of fear. That's somebody that's fearful. All these conspiracy theories you hear about, listen to them, are all about fear. This horrible thing will happen. That horrible thing will happen. There's this big trap and that big trap. It's all about fear. Fear-mongering. Why would people fear-monger? Because it gets you attention. Do you want to manipulate somebody? Well, find out what they're afraid of. You can use that to manipulate them to dance any tune you want them to dance. That's why politicians and marketers and everybody else is trying to get people to be afraid. Oh, if you want all the girls to come run and put their arms around you, then drink this beer. That's what the advertisement says, not verbally. That's what the pictures say, because the guy with the right kind of beer, all the girls run over and all like that guy, because he's got, who knows what brand, but he's got the right brand of beer. Well, they're peddling fear. If you want to be liked, then use these products. You want to be liked by men, then use these makeup and use this perfume and use this and that. You'll be better liked. People who are fearful need things like that to make them feel better about themselves. So we have a whole culture built up on fear and manipulation. People can get you to vote the way they want you to vote by scaring you.
When I was doing my research for this interview, I came across something that you said, and I got chills throughout my whole body. You said that all paths will lead to the same answer, and that the truth always floats to the top. And it resonated with me so much because when I started this journey, exploring all different types of theories, concepts, ideas, opinions, I was in my head a lot. I was in my intellect for so much of that. I was just like processing it through my head. And then it wasn't until it clicked that I had to drop down into my heart. And I realized that all paths also lead inward. And we've been saying this throughout the whole interview of the essence. It has to come from within. The change has to come from within. I'm actually wearing a shirt that says all paths lead inward. That's sort of like the tagline for this community around the podcast. And I feel that we could go on for many more hours, and I have still so many questions, brother. I would love to do this again and continue our conversations, because I feel that we just only scratched the surface in this interview. And I appreciate you so much for the work, the dedication that you've put to really uncover the truth of this reality. And I honor you, and I appreciate you so much, brother. Thank you so much.
Well, I, in return, honor you and many thousands of others who are taking out time, spending resources, going out of their way to help spread ideas. Like you just quoted, truth is not fragile. The truth in time will always float to the top. It may be suppressed and squished and hidden, but it'll eventually float to the top of the pile. It's not a fragile thing. So whatever path you take, even if it's in the wrong direction, it will lead you eventually to the right direction if you keep asking the right questions. How can I help? What can I do? How can I be of service? How can I grow? How can I become more? And if it leads you into a self-centered position, well, I'm really smart and I know a whole lot of stuff, so I can just tell people, how they should think and how they should be. And if they would just obey, then the whole world would get better quickly. It doesn't work like that. That's self-centeredness. That's arrogance. And it doesn't help people get there a lot quickly. What it does, it helps them all get their backs up and to get angry and annoyed with you, trying to tell them how to live their lives. And it creates much more entropy than it lowers. It doesn't lower entropy, it raises entropy. You have to lead by example. You change other people by changing yourself and let them change themselves. And also, when you have that perspective that everybody out there is basically doing about the best they can with what they've got to work with. What they've got to work with was basically the level of quality they had when they came here. Yes, level of quality is cumulative. More times you run around this circle and get a body and play an avatar, you get smarter and you get to keep the quality of your consciousness. That's all you get to keep. You don't come back with many memories or any kind of intellectual stuff, but you just keep the quality of your consciousness.
You don't keep the body, you don't keep the car, you don't keep the house, you keep the quality of the consciousness.
Keep your quality of consciousness, because that's the only thing that's really important.
I love that.
All the rest of that stuff is not important. So you keep that quality. So everybody here is doing about the best they can with the quality that they've had to work with. Now, that kind of puts us all in the same boat. You and me and all those people you dislike. We're all in the same boat. We're all doing the best we can with what we've got. So it's kind of hard to get angry with those people. All right, they're trying to, beat on the fear drums. They're trying to manipulate. They're trying to do all kinds of things that are horrible. Well, they think in their mind that they're doing what's good. They're trying to teach the rest of us that we need to go the way they say. Fighting with them isn't going to change them. What changes them, if you can give them a safe space to be in long enough to change themselves. They're ridden by fear, covered by fear. And shaking your fist at them and calling them names will not make them less fearful. It just doubled down on their fear. People now are out to get them. So, getting angry with people because they disagree with you is just foolish. Even getting angry with them because they're doing hurtful things is foolish. Anger won't help. Anger will just make them retreat deeper into themselves, into their own position. You have to find a way to be part of the problem and to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. If you're angry, you're part of the problem. Anger is never going to take us anywhere good. It'll only take us to a bigger, it'll just change the negative situation to a different negative situation. When the mob rises up and kills the evil dictator, they just get another dictator who soon becomes evil. And if that one doesn't, the next one will. It doesn't solve things. Anger isn't a solution. Solution is to be positive. Speak positively. Don't pass negative things around. Just be nice and caring of people, no matter what their politics are or where they are. They're still people. They're trying the best they can to do what they think is right. And if you just are who you are, you will do the most to raise them up if you are a low entropy person. That's love. Love is defined as the nature of a low entropy being, a low entropy piece of consciousness. That's love. And you don't realize how much you affect other people just by being around them. When you are low entropy, other people just resonate when you're around them. They feel happier, they feel lighter, they feel life is good. Oh, there's hope in the world. And they just, all this positivity kind of bubbles up when they're around you. So you do make a difference. That's giving them a supportive environment in which they can change themselves. Well, when that goes to the mainstream, after it goes to the mainstream, I give it about a decade before it makes a huge difference in the way we perceive things. And those evil dictators will shrink into the background, and the lying politicians will shrink into the background, because people are now at a higher level of consciousness. What we get in our institutions is a very accurate measure of who we are ourselves. Those people aren't any worse than we are. They're just like we the people, we the humans. We're that bad. We just put them in positions of power. But mostly, we humans lie, cheat, steal, do whatever we can do to get ourselves more stuff that we want, more power. And in our realm of function, control, power, and force is the coin of our realm. That's what you can spend. If you got control, power, and force, you can spend that for whatever you want. It's the coin of our realm. We need to change that. One human at a time.
Yes, sir.
Well, all right, Emilio, you look like you're going to fall asleep there and take a nap.
We're out here in Spain. It's coming up on 11 p.m. And we need, obviously, to do this again, brother. Thank you so much.